back with an exhausted Wally Johnson because sleep is overrated. No, it's not. I don't sleep well. Welcome to another episode of Stone Philosophy. As you might notice, there's a couple of differences here. Number one, we are not in a Stone Philosophy studio. We are in my bedroom with that very sexy bachelor's ceiling fan. Very popular in the 80s, by the way. And as you might notice, we are speaking English in this episode. My poor international fans that have been complaining, they feel left out. I can't blame you guys. I'm sorry. I've meant to slap on some English subtitles on the show. Haven't really had the time. And another reason why this episode is in English is the fact that I had international guests on. I was going to have Cutter on, known for his provocative nature. Our schedules did not work out, unfortunately. But I still interviewed Adam Dunn and Dan Hardy, so I thought it would be a shame if I didn't do something with those interviews. So here we are. He is a cannabis legend, a cannabis superstar. He has developed numerous famous strains such as Sage, Bubblegum, Chocolate Chunk. He is a co-founder of a hemp clothing brand, Hoodlamb. They also sponsor Sea Shepherds. He is also very aware and politically involved when it comes to environmental issues and also cannabis legalization, not just domestically but also globally. And he also happens to have his own podcast, The Adam Dunn Show, broadcast on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. Adam Dunn is somebody I'm incredibly happy and fortunate that universe crossed our paths. First of all, thank you so much to his lovely wife, Cece, who also happens to be Swedish. She's the one who linked us up. When I went to Colorado last year in April 2015, Adam Dunn was my guide, and thanks to him, I got access to so many places and venues that I would have just never gotten otherwise. And of course, I got access to dispensaries. I got to see how everything works, the system. It was just very humbling for a cannabis activist from Sweden, where you live in a country where it's completely illegal and you're not really allowed to talk about it, completely stigmatized. This interview was recorded in May, this spring. It's still very current. We talk about the election. We talk about the cannabis policies in Colorado and what's going on over there, and just the general progression of about cannabis legalization all around the world. How are you holding up, Adam?
I've been good.
Yeah.
Colorado is one of those places where you wake up every day and you're actually quite happy that you're here. You know what I mean? It's beautiful weather usually. I mean, today's a little gray, but it's usually pretty beautiful weather, and just like to be at the sort of front lines of all the stuff that's happening. It's a good feeling, you know?
It was, let me see, it's been more than a year now, like roughly a year I was there.
Yeah.
When, let me see, in the beginning of April 2015.
Right.
Had an amazing...
Goes quick, right? Goes quick, huh?
Yeah, it goes really quick. But tell me, what's the progress been? What happened in Colorado then? You had some troubles back then because you didn't have anywhere you could recreationally consume your cannabis.
Still an issue. That's still an issue this year. I'd say the biggest thing was that 420 turned out to really be a flop this year. For public safety this year, they canceled the Cannabis Cup here in Denver because it was so popular. They had gone from, in the 3-year time frame, they'd gone from about 15,000 up to about 55,000 people. And
wow.
So they were afraid it was going to get even bigger. So they sort of put a squash on it, which left everybody sort of scrambling here to do stuff. We got hit with a huge storm right around 420 also.
Oh,
shit. So maybe it was a good thing that a lot of that stuff got canceled, because what happened was they ended up doing a lot of the parties a month later. Oh. So, you can't stop these things. That's one of the things I think people got to understand, is that, this is a movement. It's not just a bunch of guys wanting to get high anymore. It's literally, a huge movement nationwide, worldwide, really. When you look at the numbers, it's all positive. You know what I mean? Even the governor here has reversed his stance, as far as he was very much like going around and publicly saying, if you're planning on legalizing cannabis in your state, you should maybe reconsider. That was his message for the longest time.
Okay.
Quite recently, like within the last week or so, when asked about his feelings about legalization in Colorado, he actually sees it working now. And he understands because obviously the taxes that have come in have been immense, much more than they ever anticipated. And, that's kind of how things work in this industry is.
You had the luxury to spend, I would say, almost a lifetime in Amsterdam, which was considered a long time to be cannabis mecca around the world. And if you ask, depending on who you ask, they still consider it to be like the forefather of it. And a misconception a lot of people have is that cannabis is legal in the Netherlands.
No, completely opposite now. It really, to the point now where I think if you go to Amsterdam without any experience from before, you might not notice the differences. But anybody who has been there before is going to really see, like, a lot of the shops are not able to be opened. Only have a very small window that they're allowed to be open because of schools being close by, etc. They've taken every single rule book that we've come up with and taken it to the next level. You know what I mean? Like, where here they're, here we're adopting legislature and we're actually looking at things a bit more realistic. Over there, it's just been like, no, we're completely against this now. After 30 plus years of being open, we're going to make it illegal for grow shops, for instance, to sell grow equipment. That's to me unfathomable, because here in America, it's, even if it was illegal, you're never able to say someone couldn't sell grow equipment. A lot of Dutch companies are now putting their eyes onto America, realizing that this is the new sort of mecca for them, because what I noticed also in Amsterdam was, if you really wanted to have grow equipment back in Amsterdam, you probably know somebody who already has some, because there's so much have been sold over the last 30 years. And that's the difference between the markets, is like Holland is a tiny little market and America is a huge market. So that's, again, it's the money that talks. So people are, all those companies that were being sort of pushed out of the industry in Holland by them not being able to sell directly to the public anymore, they all just packed up and moved away. They moved a lot of their factories out of Holland, So in anything, I think when it comes to people actually stopping business in certain countries or certain towns or certain places because of their anti-cannabis stance, it takes maybe 1 or 2 years, but after that, I think they start to realize, hey, we're just losing money, and we're not gaining anything out of by prohibiting this. All we're doing is having our people go over there to spend their money, which is what's going to happen. It's just, I think you guys have the same idea, where because of the fact that Sweden being different than, say, being able to go to Christiana or something like that. So obviously, if there was a Christiana in Sweden, then people wouldn't go to Christiana so quickly because it'd be there. It's just kind of this. It's a very common thing. Same in Belgium. When I lived in Holland, it was like all these people from Belgium would come up to Holland because they could buy cannabis. You know what I mean? And it was like, why don't they just make it legal right where they are and then create a bigger?
It's funny because you're bringing up a factor. Why? First of all, if I may ask, is this? Well, I gotta explain the first to get to the other, I guess. But the reason is why Netherlands has lost its popularity among cannabis is because Czech Republic has almost legalized, they decriminalized,
sure.
But they allow selling and medical and whatnot. What's this called? Germany, Spain, all these nations, and
that to me is the most amazing thing ever. Hearing Germany talk about it, so that
and that's the thing, because Amsterdam has started, or Netherlands has started losing tourism because they go to these other places. From what I understand, that's where the conservatives came in and gained power. And is this because you didn't see any tax revenue in the Netherlands? Is this why?
The interesting part about Holland and the way that their tax system worked is nothing, because it wasn't legal. There's never a box to check on the tax form that says how much you purchased of cannabis, let's say. Yeah. But there is a sort of box there which you can put something in. It's just not. It never has the word cannabis connected to it, even though that's your number one thing that your shop would be purchasing to sell. So, for instance, you have a coffee shop in Amsterdam and you buy 2 kilos a week coming in through your store. and it's all on the books because it has to be, but never says the words cannabis or marijuana or anything like that. It basically has an X next to it. So the idea, so you're looking at your coffee, this is what we sold in coffee, this is what we sold in postcards, and this gigantic number at the bottom is what we sold in other stuff, So the fact that they never legitified it, made it into something real, is always, you have no ground to stand on at that point. And I think Holland has always been a money-fixated country, so I know this is hurting them personally as far as on a daily. When they see tourism dropping, people would come in from California or from New York or from all these states that now have the same policies. So they're like, well, they have no reason to come to Holland anymore. For every gram of cannabis that's consumed in a place like Amsterdam or here in Colorado, if you're not from here or you're not from Amsterdam, just to get that 1 gram of cannabis, you had to stay in a hotel. You had to fly there, stay in a hotel, eat food, rent a bicycle, take a cab, go to a club, eat dinner. All those other things cost much more than that gram of cannabis, but the whole reason that you were there was for that gram of cannabis. You know what I mean? That accessibility to that cannabis, maybe not just 1 gram, maybe more, but even putting it into a number again, if you start to figure out how much ancillary businesses become successful based on the fact that you have a very open cannabis policy, pretty sure as younger people become, in power and have the idea to see this thing a little bit more realistic, you'll see many more places adopting quickly as cannabis becomes more accepted. And you'll see this wave is going to be, I hope we finish this movie before it becomes legal all over the world. Because
that's my fear too, man. That's my fear too.
Behind the times soon. You might be behind the times when they say, hey, you know what? It's all legal. Because that's the way it is. It goes very, very, very fast. To the point where when we moved here in 2010, it wasn't legal yet.
Yeah.
It didn't become legal for almost 4 years after that, 3.5 years. But in those 3.5 years, I still didn't see it coming. You know what I mean? None of us. We all felt it could happen, but it wasn't like there was no guarantee.
No.
And the minute that it happened here, it almost guaranteed it for the next places because
it's a domino effect.
Very much so,
It's a domino effect, and you're completely right, and it's rubbing off internationally because even in Europe, Ireland legalized. They decriminalized the use of cannabis and heroin, by the way.
Right.
So they
took it the next step. They took it a little. But they have big problems there too. So
they have a heroin epidemic.
And I think everywhere needs to look at what their own personal problem might be. The one thing that Holland did have for the longest time was a very strong sort of program based for heroin addicts, where you didn't see young people getting into heroin in Holland because it was in your face. Okay. You watched the guys get on the bus, get their methadone, and come off the bus. It didn't look like a club you wanted to join, you know what I mean? You weren't like, hey, that looks like fun. I want to do that. I need to get stuck on a bus every day getting my methadone. Nobody wants to do that. But the minute you take it away and you hide it, and it becomes like prescription pills and other forms of the same exact thing, people don't recognize it, you know what I mean? They all of a sudden are like accepting of it. Oh, it's in a pill form. It must be okay. Actually, that's the same exact thing that those guys that are standing over there on the bridge shooting up are doing. It's just in a more packaged form, you know?
And the whole perception that there's a dude in a white robe giving me this, it's safe.
Right. We're kind of like protected in a small way because of the legalization in Colorado, we don't see it as much. It's still here. It's not like it doesn't happen, but it's much less. You know what I mean? Whereas you can go just one state over, or go somewhere that is still stigmatized or whatever, and to get to that cannabis, you have to go to the same guy that sells possibly heroin. You know what I mean? So now you've opened yourself up. And it's such an obvious thing. And it's like when people are scared about kids and accessibility and all that, I'm like, it's pretty hard for a kid to buy a beer, but it's pretty easy for a kid to buy weed if he's in a legal state, because that's the easy accessibility. The alcohol is hard because you have to have an ID and they actually check it. You know what I mean?
No, it's absolutely. We have the same problem here in Sweden, especially in this city.
a kid can score a dime bag with no problem whatsoever, but wanting to have alcohol or cigarettes is just it will not be that easy.
Sure.
But
and nobody's buying them for them either because they understand that it's big trouble. You don't buy kids alcohol. I mean, that was back when I was a kid. You could get away with that stuff, but they don't like I think you told me you didn't start smoking till you were.
Lost you there for a second.
Mid-20s, right?
I was almost
So you
30.
you didn't start until like your mid-20s, right?
No, in my 30, 29.
Yeah, almost late. Yeah, so
almost 30.
So I mean, you're coming at it from a completely different angle than somebody who, like myself, who started smoking young. You know, but you know, when you're young and you're just doing things, you're just doing things. You know what I mean? You don't know you don't know the path it's changing or not. But you know, I felt lucky that when I was a kid, I kind of gravitated towards cannabis without understanding the implications of how big this was going to be in my life.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, as a career now and as a sort of lifelong ambition. Because right now what I really feel like is I moved to Holland in '89, moved back in 2010, and that 21-year gap there was about the exact amount of time it took for America to sort of see the light, in a sense.
The election, tell me, it's not impossible for Bernie yet. It's not impossible, even though it's tight. But let me just ask you like this. Let me put it like that. What do you think the cannabis policies will be under a rule of Clinton contra a rule of Bernie?
Well, you know, the thing is, okay, obviously with Bernie, we understand that he would be the ultimate cannabis president in the sense that he's, you know, from Vermont, liberal state. His wife is the Deadheads. They understand like what's going on. They're pretty much like our ultimate candidate.
Yeah.
The thing with Hillary is if she wins, I think she's going to have so many other issues to deal with that cannabis will be kind of backburnered in a sense of let it do its thing because it's generating cash. Right? I mean, right now we are unstoppable because California will be legal sooner than not. I mean, 2017 is basically when it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
It might get pushed a year back. Who knows? The only reason it would get pushed back is because California is such a big, humongous, gigantic money machine, like when it comes to cannabis, and that the transition is going to be hard. It's not going to be overnight, you know?
Yeah.
So Hillary, I think, would every single candidate has already said that they're pro-cannabis because they understand if they say they're negative, if they say they're not, they're never going to win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the momentum is too hard in our favor at this point. So
it's the new gay marriage. That question.
Yeah, exactly. Like
you don't want to be on the wrong side of history.
Now they have to say they're for it because otherwise they're going to look like really, really behind the times. But you know, so I don't think we have a really negative future on cannabis with any of the people being elected because none of them have any power when it comes to really reversing any of this.
Okay.
Like, even if they wanted to, even if there was somebody who had a huge, like, oh, this is never going to be on my watch or whatever.
Yeah.
Good luck, you know what I mean? Good luck, guys. You have no chance of stopping it. So I'm not too concerned on that. I mean, I'm concerned for the rest of the society and the cannabis people. I'm least concerned because I feel like we have the power on our side.
Yeah.
But when it comes to anything else, you know, I feel like if Bernie doesn't win, that's like America going really pushed back, like, please don't follow us in any way, shape, or form. These other people win.
Bad,
you know what I mean? And I believe, like, from the beginning, I saw Bernie as being obviously my hopeful. I didn't think he would even make it this far, but now I feel like he's gotten way past the point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now because what I love is that he's now a movement. He's not a candidate anymore. If he doesn't win, he's got so many people awakened in this last election. It's pretty awesome to see because it's also very easy now to go through Facebook and figure out who your friends are and who aren't. You're like, you are definitely not my friend anymore because this is like anybody who's a Trump out there pushing for Trump right now, you kind of like are understanding that, wow, I guess we don't have the same ideas.
Oh my God.
You know?
Adam Dunn, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed that interview, I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy the longer interview I had with him for Mary and I. Adam and Cece, if you're watching this, thank you so much again. Really, from the bottom of my heart, I had a blast when I was in Colorado, and I'm looking forward to come back. My next guest is, I don't know how I got hold of this guy. I don't know, because it's not just a fighter I've been looking up to. It's just his overall opinions and how he seems to be as a person. It's just somebody I've looked up to for the last 4 or 5 years, I would say. I was initially going to interview him in real life when I went to London in April, but our schedules just clashed and it didn't work out, so it had to be through Skype. And this is the most pathetic thing. I got starstruck through Skype. I'm not somebody who gets starstruck, okay? I've met a lot of big names or whatever you want to call it. I'm not bragging, I'm just saying. Dan Hardy is just somebody that I look up to. I genuinely do. I think he has such a wholesome attitude. He was really generous with his time. I didn't feel like embarrassed about asking anything. And if you're into MMA, I'm pretty sure you will appreciate this man's aspect, no matter what you think about cannabis or veganism.
What's the situation in the UK?
I don't know. It changed a couple of years ago, and then it shifted back again. They kind of they declassified it. It came down to a Class C drug. So basically, it's down to the discretion of the police officer whether they want to confiscate it or not if you have it on you. But then I think that was changed again recently. So to be honest, I don't pay a great deal of attention to it. I know what feels honest and good for me, and I just stick with that. And I'm not a bad person. I'm not a lawbreaker. I've got a clean criminal record. Never had any kind of issues. Never failed a drug test. So I kind of approach it from a common sense perspective, and I've never had a problem.
Good people break bad laws.
So that's true. We're working on it, right?
Yeah, and your nickname is the Outlaw, after all.
That's it.
But like I mentioned before, I've seen your appearances on Brian Rose's London Reel. You talked about the fact that psychedelics doesn't change you; it just turns you really into who you are.
My approach was purely from a constructive perspective. When I started it, I was recommended by a doctor in California. I was struggling because I don't take any kind of medication or any kind of anything for pain management. So as you can imagine, when you're training a full contact sport and you're training 5-6 hours a day, you get beaten up. I mean, we spend quite a bit of time in pain, and that's why some fighters have problems with painkillers and stuff. But because I don't want to numb the feeling, I want to be aware of it. I just want to be able to tolerate it a bit better. And it was starting to affect my sleep, my appetite. Just generally my quality of life, and I wasn't going to stop because it was my career, it was my profession, so I needed to do something to manage it. And when a doctor in California recommended that I try smoking a little bit before bed, I gave it a go, and honestly the results were absolutely unbelievable. And it kind of like the way I changed my diet and I started taking animal products out. It was necessity first, it was functionality first, and then it became much more of a moral and spiritual perspective.
Nick Diaz got, if you ask me, the ridiculous punishment of, what was it, like the verdict was 5 years initially.
Yeah.
And then they reverted it to 18 months. I don't think I have to ask you whether or not you think that's ridiculous or not, but the Nevada State Athletic Commission, they raised the bar from what I understood.
Yeah, they did, and that was partly down to Mark Ratner, the guy that works within the UFC now. He's kind of like the independent governing body that travels with the UFC. He's a very, very good man, very switched on man, very generous with his time. I see him at all different kinds of amateur wrestling tournaments and that kind of thing as well. And I contacted him and offered my service. I said, if you need somebody to speak out in favor of it, then please contact me. For fighters, I mean, what's better, having fighters that are filled with painkillers or having fighters that have a smoke every now and then? It's a no-brainer to me. If something that grows out of the ground, it is always going to take a precedent over something that's pharmaceutically produced. So I want to be proactive in furthering the acceptance of it, particularly in the sport. And I know a lot of fighters were struggling with it. And those last 4 weeks of training camp where you would have to stop, to pass a drug test around the fight time. those last 4 weeks are the most difficult. They're where you're most uncomfortable, where your appetite is affected and your sleep's affected. And it's not a performance enhancer. It's not. I mean, you can't say that. No more than caffeine would be, or something like that.
That was going to be my next question. That you, as a professional athlete, obviously we're on the same page here because I've done my research. I consider cannabis to be a stimulant, if you ask me. I function. All my friends, they always say, Wally, you're like the opposite stereotype of a stoner because you're always active, you're proactive. I'm always on the go. Do you think, because the NFL is talking about alleviating the rules a little bit around it, and those guys are really suffering from prescription painkiller addiction. It's crazy. Do you think they're going to remove it eventually? Do you think cannabis is going to disappear from the list of banned substance?
To implement that into professional sports is going to take some time. But when people start seeing the results, I mean, there's so much evidence out there now. There's so many different research programs trying to find the uses and the benefits of it that it's only a matter of time before we get there. The argument is that it still does affect the functionality of the brain. It still does. It changes the way that you see things, the way that you react to things. There's no doubt about that. I mean, like you said, it's a stimulant, and caffeine is managed as a stimulant just as much as I think marijuana should be in professional sports. So if we can get it to the stage where it's treated on a similar part to caffeine, then I think we're doing the right thing.
Veganism.
Yeah, it started off, I was experimenting with my diet, as I always did through training camp. And one of the first things I took out was dairy products, and noticed my energy levels changed, my skin improved. There were a lot of things that I noticed. My sleep was better. And I kind of, my diet fluctuated back and forth with training camps. I would try different things. But the one thing that was consistent was that when I ate meat, I felt sluggish and slow the next day. Because, I didn't realize at the time, but my body was spending, 3-4 days digesting something that, is taken from my energy levels. It takes a percentage of my energy to digest meat.
You also mentioned that you have a hard time gaining weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, people always ask me, like, Wally, you're at your fucking high school weight. What's the trick? And it's just like you said, you took the words out of my mouth. I said I have to eat like pasta for 2 weeks and like peanut butter. And maybe I gain a pound. Tell me about that. How does that feel before? You told me about the digestive, but how does it feel like the weight now being vegan and fighter?
Fortunately, I'm not, with me not competing at the moment, I'm not checking my weight very often. I check it, once a week at the most. And
is it sensitive to ask what do you walk around on now?
Do you want pounds or kilos?
Pounds.
About 183.
183, but that's not bad.
Well, no, in comparison to when I was 215, when I was fighting at welterweight. What I found is that as I started to take animal products out of my diet, I had to eat more just to increase the calories, just to get enough fuel in me. But I could eat as much as I wanted. There wasn't a point where I was hungry. Even when I was cutting for a fight. Yeah. I mean, my last 2 fights, I cut about 5-6 pounds the week of the fight, and that in comparison to when I would do 25 is a massive difference. And that was no effort for me to get down to that weight. It was what became natural for me. Yeah. I eat as much as I want, as often as I want, and my body has found natural weight, and I don't ever seem to gain or lose weight. It's perfect for me. If I wanted to gain weight, I would have to make an effort, like you said, loads of rice and avocado, loads of peanuts, and that kind of thing, bulking foods. But it's a conscious effort I have to make now if I want to gain any weight.
Talking about weight with Anthony Johnson.
Yeah.
That beast fights in 205 today. And you fought him in welterweight. Tell me about that fight.
He was just big. He was just really big. I mean, we knew each other pretty well going into the fight anyway, because we were both sponsored by Tap Out for a long time, and we would see each other at autograph signings. We both enjoyed doing autograph signings and meeting fans, so our paths would cross all the time. And every time I saw him, I would always make a joke. I would always, say, "Oh, what weight class are you in now?" And "Oh, what are you weighing now? You look massive." I mean, I was always considered a fairly big welterweight. I mean, if you see my square off with GSP, I was a lot thicker back then. I was a lot bigger. I was doing a lot of strength training and stuff. But even standing next to Anthony Johnson, I looked like a featherweight. He's massive. But I put a lot of pressure on him to make weight for that fight, and I really didn't think he was going to, and he did. So I was really impressed. He got off the scales at 170, and I thought, okay, we're about the same size. This will be a good fight. I honestly thought that switched him with somebody else.
Wow.
He looked like a different human being entirely. How he does it, I don't know.
Overnight, right? Just gains 20 pounds or something crazy like that.
He was 44 pounds heavier apparently on the day.
That's crazy. 44 pounds?
2 weight classes.
Like I couldn't gain that weight if my life depended on it. Like really, like you could have a gun to my mom's head. I'm just like, there's nothing I could do. And I would have to eat another person. How can I not ask if you will make a comeback?
I would like to. Yeah, I would very much like to. It's so difficult to step away from something that you've done your whole life and you love so much. You know, I mean, my first professional fight was in 2004, but I've been fighting since I was 7. You know, and this is the longest I've taken since I was born away from fighting. You know, I mean, it's been 3 and a bit years now, 3.5 years or something. And well, the last time I had a break was before I started martial arts. You know, I've been fighting so regularly. It's just who I am. It's what I do. So to step away from it's been really difficult, and there would have been no way of doing it without being forced out of the sport, I don't think. I mean, it's kind of worked out perfectly because I've fallen into a job that I love, that I'm very involved in the sport. But as I feel right now, I've just turned 34, and my body has never felt better than it does right now. So I would just like to get back in there and maybe do 2 or 3 more, and just give a better account of myself than what I've done so far.
My friends and I, it's still a topic running among us, is that how the hell your arms did not snap when you met GSP. And I know maybe it's such an like outdated question and you're getting that all the time, but like, what's your trick? What was that? What happy place do you go to when your arm is like this close to just break? What's what was going on there? Was that just pride, or what force inside of you made you?
It was a combination of a few things. One was just general stubbornness, which I was born with. Pretty much everybody in my family is really stubborn, so that's no surprise. The other thing as well is the determination that I had going into the fight. So many people were saying I was going to get submitted in the first round, just completely writing me off like I had absolutely no chance at all. And you know, I was technically inferior on the night, and the fight went as well as it could have done for me at the time. But one thing I could show, one thing I could prove is how much heart I've got and how much I deserve to be in there with my determination alone. So I knew that as long as I could keep my arm moving, it was relatively safe. I mean, I have quite strange elbows anyway. They don't quite lock, which I think helps a little bit. But if you go back and look at the submission, GSP's knees were there was a bit of space between his knees, so I was able to keep my arm moving a bit. And one other thing that was a massive help was that the last month before the fight, I spent a lot of time on the mats at Matt Serra's jiu-jitsu school in Ireland.
Yeah.
So obviously, he fought GSP one time before. He's a fantastic jiu-jitsu player himself.
He
had 3 of his best black belts just go arm bar attack, arm triangle attack, just all the things that GSP is known for. So I must have drilled that same escape 1,000 times the 4 weeks before. So it was right fresh in my grey matter, and I knew that Matt Serra was watching as well. So I couldn't disappoint him by getting caught in that.
If you would make a comeback, who would you like to meet? Here's your chance to call somebody out. No, I'm just joking. Who would you like to meet? What do you think about the welterweight division today compared to when you left? Is it just me, or does every weight class get bigger? It feels like light heavyweights look like heavyweights. It feels like middleweights look like Uriah Hall. That guy looks like I mean, I'm pretty sure he is a light heavyweight between fights. But like, what do you feel like today? How's the competition compare?
It's gotten better, most definitely. I think not necessarily better at the top level. I mean, it's still difficult to say that anybody's better than GSP because we just don't know. But at the time, GSP had absolutely locked the division down, and everybody else was, I mean, even people that were close, like John Fitch and Thiago Alves, they're the guys that come to mind. Even those guys, as good as they were, they weren't good enough to even touch GSP. Whereas if you look at the top sort of 5 or 6 of any weight class now, you're starting to think any of these guys could win. So, I mean, for myself, I don't really know how I would fit in. I'm not necessarily interested in jumping back into, I'm not at all interested in jumping back into rankings and chasing belts or anything like that. If I came back to fight, it would be for the occasional one-off fight, just for my own journey in martial arts. You know, I mean, if I'm going back, I'm gonna have to fight some of the older veterans in the sport, because these new kids look too good for me.
What's next for Dan Hardy?
What's next? Well, I'm just discussing with the UFC an expansion to my role within Europe. I'm seeing some opportunities that are being missed for the sport and for the industry, and I'm far more useful to the UFC than I'm being made than they're making of at the moment. I could be doing a lot more. So I've got a few different things I'm pushing for at the moment within the UFC, and a few things that they're keen on me moving into as well. So, but for me, my focus really is to continue developing mixed martial arts in Europe, because I think we're still a little bit behind. And I think it's not for a lack of talent and a lack of athletes. I think it's for a lack of unity. You know, the benefit in North America, the benefit in South America is that they can pretty much all understand what each other is saying. And we don't have that luxury in Europe. You know, I can jump on a plane and travel an hour in pretty much any direction and meet someone that I have no idea what they're saying. Whereas North America, everybody speaks English, so it's much easier for the sport to grow when everyone can communicate better.
From what I understand, you come here frequently. You've been to this city, Malmö.
Yeah, I love Sweden. I've been there a few times. I taught a bunch of seminars. I travelled around. Malmö, obviously Stockholm and Gothenburg. I have good friends in Sweden, and I'm a big fan of Gustafsson and the whole All Stars group. Sweden's a beautiful place, full of beautiful people, and the events that we've done there have been amazing. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the UFC coming back and getting on the mic for it.
UFC, I mean, they have Joe Rogan, obviously. It's Joe being Joe. Have you ever had any troubles with sponsors, anything about your stance, or just...
No, and you know, it's kind of like tattoos. I always say this. I like tattoos because if somebody doesn't like tattoos, they won't speak to me. You know, if a sponsor's going to look at me and go, yeah, but he drinks ayahuasca or he talks about mushrooms sometimes, it's the wrong sponsor. You know, I think all we can do is be ourselves. I don't want to be contrived in any way.
Any last message? Anything else that you want to promote, or something we need to be on the lookout for?
No, I don't think so. Just follow me on social networking. That's the best way to get a hold of me. I do all my own social networking. Dan Hardy MMA across the board.
Thank you so much for your time, knowing you're a busy man. But I wish you nothing but the best. Good luck with everything in the future. Take care, Dan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend. I'll speak to you again.
I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. If you liked that interview, I highly recommend you to check out the 2 times he was on Brian Rose's show, London Real. You can find it here on YouTube. 2 long interviews with Dan Hardy, which I also think you're going to appreciate. Thank you so much again, Dan. I'm pretty sure our paths will cross again. And maybe I'll get to do an interview for Mary and I with you. Next episode of Stone Philosophy will be the last episode for the season, and it will be in the studio, and it will be more traditional. This episode will have no famous names on it or anything like that. It will be regular people that are actually coming out. And one of our staff members will be coming out as well. And we are encouraging people to come out, obviously, and normalize more. That will be the last episode for the season. I will make an additional kind of like extra material episode. Actually, I'm going to make an epilogue where I'm just going to wrap everything up and explain more why I did Stone Philosophy and talk a little bit about Mary and I. So thank you so much for tuning in yet another time. Make sure to share this video with everyone you know if you liked it. So I'll see you in episode 6.